All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to break down the core claims of a group called the Covenant Family Reboot Movement. Now, they make some pretty bold statements about why they believe modern Christian marriages are struggling, often in ways people don't even see. They say they've figured out not just the problem, but also the solution. So let's take a look at what their actual argument is.
So, this is really the question at the heart of it all. This is what the entire movement is trying to answer. They have this idea that a lot of couples are up against what they call silent obstacles, things that can't quite put their finger on. And this group is pretty confident they've identified exactly what those obstacles are.
So, what's their big claim? Well, looking at their materials, the whole problem really boils down to 5 key issues. We're going to break them down one by one.
The basic idea here is that they don't think struggles in a marriage are just random or bad luck. No, they argue there are very specific roadblocks, and that these can be cleared by applying what they refer to as biblical principles. So you can see they're setting up a very clear problem and solution kind of framework.
And that brings us to what's probably their most dramatic claim, something they call the silent decline. This is all about how a marriage can erode from the inside out, and wow, do they attach a startling number to it.
Just 80%. They kind of just drop that number out there, right? With no context at first. It's designed to make you stop and think. 80% of what exactly?
And here's the rest of it. The key phrase they use isn't divorce, it's silently die. That term suggests a kind of internal collapse that you can't even see from the outside. And they claim this is happening to a huge majority of Christian marriages, all within the first 5 years.
So that begs the question, right? What does a silent death actually look like in a real relationship? Well, the movement goes on to define the specific behaviors they think are causing this.
These zero in on 2 big things. First, this concept of an emotional divorce, where the couple is still legally married, but that connection, that bond, is just gone. And they pair that with something that sounds simple but is really destructive. Couples just stop being kind to each other. The whole idea here is that a marriage can look totally fine to everyone else while this internal breakdown is already happening.
Okay, so after talking about what's happening inside the relationship, the movement pivots. They start to focus on what they see as destructive ideas coming from the outside, from the culture around us.
Now this next one, it's probably one of their most controversial points. They take a value that our culture tends to really celebrate, independence, and they frame it as a direct threat to a marriage. Their whole argument is that a covenant relationship demands interdependence, not 2 separate people just kind of operating on their own tracks.
And this one really goes after a big assumption in the Christian community, the idea that just sharing the same faith is enough to make a marriage work. The point this movement makes is that simply believing the same thing isn't enough if, in their view, the core biblical principles for how a marriage should function aren't being put into practice.
You know, it's really important to remember something here. They're not just throwing out ideas. They're presenting these points as assertions. These are confident, forceful statements presented as if they are facts. These aren't just things to think about. They're positioned as the fundamental problems that their whole program is designed to fix.
So, okay, they've laid out all these problems. What's the solution? Well, they've got a pretty clear path they want you to follow, a direct call to action.
And that path leads right to their website, where they tell you to go to familyreboot.org. They lay out a 3-step process for you. First, learn more about their whole perspective. Then, you can try out some free mini lessons. And finally, if you're bought in, you can register for their full program.
So yeah, you can see it laid out here. It's a simple path they're offering. It's designed to take someone from just being curious about these ideas all the way to becoming a full participant in their course. So, when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway from their material? The entire framework for the Covenant Family Reboot movement seems to rest on this 2-part diagnosis. First, there's a silent internal decay happening inside the marriage, and second, there's a major conflict with outside cultural ideas, specifically this idea of independence. And that really leaves us with one last big question, doesn't it? After looking at these 5 key assertions this movement puts forward, everything from that 80% statistic to their critique of independence, the question to reflect on is this: are these really the core issues that modern marriages are facing today? Something to think about.